Hello, my name is Ben Friedman, host of Ben and Bran See a Movie. And if you can't tell by the outfit that I am wearing, this week on the show, we are talking the movie Top Gun starring Tom Cruise. Branson is still out this week, so I am joined by contributing writer for The Onion and The New Yorker, Spencer Roth-Rose. I had a blast shooting this episode with Spencer. Spencer is an extremely funny, extremely talented writer slash filmmaker. He produced, directed, wrote a podcast called Blackout Dates, which is basically the reimagining of the fall of MoviePass and why it fell. It is extremely funny. I cannot recommend it enough to you. Check it out in the description below. I'll have the link for that there. But yeah, I really enjoyed having Spencer on the show. He got the energy of the show right away. He brought the humor. He was the absolutely perfect guest to have on to talk Top Gun, that I was glad that Spencer and I got to dive deep into. With that all said, I'm going to throw it back to myself. So, welcome to the show, Ben and Bran See a Movie. All right, welcome everybody to Ben and Bran See a Movie. I am your host today, Ben Friedman, and today on Ben and Bran See a Movie, I got the need to record a podcast, and to fulfill my needs, I brought on filmmaker and contributor for such publications as The Onion, The New Yorker, and McSweeney's, Spencer Roth-Rose. Spencer, are you ready to take my breath away?
Hey Ben, I am so ready. We got Ben and Spence See a Movie today.
Ben and Spence See a Movie.
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited to have you on. I've been following you on Twitter for a few months, and I just love the energy, and I knew you'd be a great addition. And I knew there was a moment in time where I'm like, I need to get this guy on the show. And it was when you and I both had a shared interest in John Hinckley Jr.'s music career.
Oh, I didn't know that you were also a Hinckleyman.
I wrote my thesis paper in college about him.
Are you kidding? That's so intense.
Not like I wrote it on the whole assassination attempt and like
just on his psychology. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? The effects that his shooting had on stigmatizing mentally ill people.
Yeah.
Was my thesis.
That's
but yes,
a rich topic. Can you send that to me?
Yeah, I'll have to find it, but yeah, I'll definitely send it to you.
Awesome.
But yeah,
music isn't half bad, honestly.
Is it not? Have you listened?
Oh, I listened to it on Spotify semi-regularly, and like it's great in this kind of like sort of simple like Americana folk, like kind of good vibes way, in a way that you might not expect from someone who tried to assassinate a president. But like he's reformed. He's making good tunes.
Yeah, man. When I saw that you were like following that and like listen to it on and tweeting about it on Twitter, I'm like, this guy's got to come on the show. That's the energy I need on this show. And so I'm just thrilled to have you on, man. I first heard of you because I was tasked when still work with Highbrow Magazine to review something called Blackout Dates, the TRUE MoviePass Story. And I just wanted to let you just go off on that for a second because I think this thing's hysterical, and I just wanted you to explain what it is.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was a really fun project I did with my friend Zac Gelfand last fall. We did an 8-episode podcast inspired by the rise and fall of MoviePass. If I know Ben was a fan of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people around New York were for sure, and probably all over the country. 3 million of you to be exact. And basically we took the circumstances surrounding MoviePass's demise and sort of invented a whole secret history for it. We started out in reality. We did like one episode that was an actual investigation, and then the rest of the episodes were sort of a film noir surreal parody as we got sucked into this like deep conspiracy surrounding what really went down behind the scenes at MoviePass. So yeah, stuff gets really weird. Ben, I was actually really pleased to see your review back a few months ago, because we had to fight for every piece of publicity for that. Like we had like a publicist who was doing some stuff, but everything we basically knew everything that was coming out, and then we see your review pop up, and we're like,
Hmm.
holy shit! Like we didn't even know this was coming. Like you said, you got assigned by your editor.
Yes, my editor, I believe, got it from your publicist. So she sent it out to uh, the group emails and said, "Does anyone want to take this?" And I mean, at that point, I was just starting off and was
Mm-hmm.
only getting like one feature every 2 months. So really, anything that I could take, I was taking. So I took
You didn't
this
wait
one.
until you hit like a podcast that was like exactly your shit, you know?
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I was just like, I'm doing everything I can. Uh, And what was funny is when I watched this, I didn't get any real notes on it. So all I had known was the title Blackout Dates, the True Movie Past Story.
Uh huh.
And for the first episode and a half, I didn't realize it was fictitious.
Yeah, that's by design. Like
Like,
we wanted people to like slowly be like, wait a second, like this is becoming a little too insane. Like the lines are a little bit too funny to be real. You know, like
yeah,
we wanted people to slowly, have that
when
dawn on
part
them.
one ends, I remember texting one of my friends who was like, also a movie pass user at the time. And I'm like, you got to listen to this. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, how does everyone not know this movie pass story? And then as I went on, I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Like, this is the comedy coming through. And it's done in just a really brilliant way because you're right. It kind of reminded me, uh, it's interesting to take a format basically like radio shows, like, Orson Welles' old War of the Worlds,
Totally.
and bring it to podcast form in such a unique and clever way. And it was interesting because at the same time, Branson and I were trying to work on a project like that and get something off the ground. So when we were writing stuff based on that, we were looking at, okay, what's the format that works best for this, and how can we express it on podcasts and not traditional radio? So we were looking to you guys for kind of our writing styles. We've shelved it for the time being. We'll probably revisit it at some point, but you guys were like the model we were looking at because I'm like, this is just so ingeniously crazy.
That's awesome, man. I mean, that's so great to hear. Like that makes me feel really good as like a creator and like someone who makes stuff. Hearing that like that, yeah, you were able to like glean what you needed from it. I think was really great. And I think you were pretty much the target audience for it too. Like a movie pass fan who wouldn't be totally put off by the fact that it becomes completely fictional and comedic. Like it sounds like you went into it like with the right attitude there, and you rolled with the punches. I think in the way that we were really hoping our listeners would.
I think if I took MoviePass seriously at all, I just like I don't know who can take MoviePass seriously at all. Like you were subscribed to it in 2017, 2018, whatever the heyday of it was.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Do you remember getting the emails week to week?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, our company's not on fire. It's fine.
Yeah.
But you can't see Mission Impossible Fallout this
It
week.
was awesome. It was so good. Like I loved all of that drama too. Like
Yeah,
I was ready for that as it was coming.
I remember the dog in the email where they're like, "Oops, this dog accidentally unplugged something or something like that," and I'm just like, "This is fantastic."
Right, exactly. It was like
I
it
was
was basically like being at Firefest, but instead
exactly.
of
It was
like
like
eating
it was
shitty
seeing
sandwiches or
something.
going to movies.
Yeah, it was seeing something could never work because that was the whole point of me getting into MoviePass. I knew it could never work, and I was still like, I got to get it in on this because I have to be one of the ones that helps make the company realize it will never work because I'm
It's my duty. Yeah.
yeah, I was in college at the time and I was broke. So going to see a movie for however much MoviePass was a month, it was insane. I had it in the summer of 2018. I remember there were 2 weeks straight where I saw a movie every day in theaters.
That's awesome.
They lost so much money from me.
Yeah, and it felt so good.
It felt so great.
He's bringing it back allegedly.
There's no
That's the right
news,
attitude. Yeah, sure.
There's no news you could tell me about MoviePass
Yeah.
that I wouldn't believe. If we found out in like 2 years that your like satire ended up being like way more true than we were believed, and there was some sort of deal with this ancient demon, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah,
like just to save
we
the
like
company.
stumble backwards into what actually happened.
Yeah, like this guy. I'm blanking on the movie pass. Is it something Low?
Mitch Lowe, yeah,
Mitch Lowe.
my guy.
I would not be shocked if he just has a target out on your backs and it's just like these guys. They got it too close.
We were a
Like
little bit worried that he would sue us, actually. Zach's future father-in-law is a lawyer, and he was kind of advising us. And my sort of attitude throughout the entire thing was like, if we get to the point where Mitch Lowe has found out about this and is suing us, like that is victory enough.
No, I agree. That's like the ultimate, like we've done it and this guy's pissed off and it just starts more movie pass drama.
Right,
And that's
exactly.
that's what the general audience needs. I've been finding it really boring since 2019 when Movie Pass really just goes away.
Yeah,
And I've
my
just
life's
had
been
to
missing
live
something.
it's been empty, really, honestly. So I'm still hoping that there's time for him to find out and sue. I can't wait for the shenanigans of that on court. I'll be watching that on
Yeah, that'll be
civil.
season 2. We'll report on it live.
Yeah, that'd be great. The trial.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
trial of Movie Pass.
Yep.
I love it. All right, man. With that all said, like I said, Blackout Dates, the True MoviePass Story. I'll have a link to that in this video's description so you can check it out. Really, like I said, check it out. It's great content. It's really funny. And before we jumped into the actual conversation of Top Gun, I wanted to know your background, man, in film making, and just like being a film fan.
Yeah, that's a great question. It basically all kind of, I think the earliest like I can trace my being a movie fan is to my grandmother's condo in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go and visit her, and she had a book of the like AFI 100 greatest movies of all time.
Yeah.
And when it was too hot to be outside, I would be inside reading that book.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was probably 9, 10 at the time, and like I still have a memory in my head of pretty much every movie that was in there. Like I will see a movie out in the wild and I'll be like, oh, that was in the book, I gotta watch that. So I think like my sort of interacting with movies from that sort of perspective of like, oh, there's a canon and I want to get familiar with it, sort of stems from that. But my mom, like, she showed us all the Hitchcocks. My dad showed us Citizen Kane when I was like way too young to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But beyond that, and I started like making films and stuff in like, middle school, just doing silly stuff around the house with my brother. But I've stuck with that a little bit, and I did some in college, and I still, make a thing every now and then, but I'm doing some more writing these days, which is really nice. So yeah, that's sort of my relationship with film. And I just try to watch kind of as much stuff as I can, and get people to go see stuff with me whenever I can convince them. So yeah.
Yeah, I had the similar experience where I know you have the AFI book. Mine AFI book was going to Blockbuster between probably like 2002 to 2007, I think was my heyday. So I'm what, like between the age of like 5 to 10 is probably like when. And so there's this group of movies from like 1998 to about 2005 that those are the movies that are on the shelves that I'll never forget. Like I remember seeing Austin Powers like just on the shelf and being like, I need to see that movie. Or like even is it called Eight-Legged Freaks?
Eight-Legged Freaks, yeah.
Yep, that's a cover that I'll just never forget. I've never seen the movie, but there's just those random covers where I'm just like, I can tell you a lot about the movie, and I've never seen the movie, but I just remember picking it up at a Blockbuster. Same with like oh gosh, what was the name of that movie? I think it was Epic Movie.
Yeah.
Which was just that one I did end up seeing later in life, but I just remember like the idea of Jack Sparrow, Nacho Libre, all these characters that I just didn't realize they were playing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, they're all in one movie together. This has to be the funniest. And I remember trying to convince my mom. I'm like, Mom, it's unrated. That means it's appropriate.
That's so funny.
So I'm just like, so that's like my recollection. So we have that kind of same thing in common where it's just that there's these movies in our heads that have been ingrained there since we've been like young.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are impressionable to me. Like I said, the Austin Powers, I'll never forget the poster to The Spy Who Shagged Me, which was a joke that as a kid I didn't get.
I still don't get it. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know. What's sex?
For me, yeah, it's like it's those AFI books, and then like It's funny how much when you start becoming aware of stuff, how much that stuff sticks with you, and how you start like you're really just sponge absorbing like everything that you see surrounding that topic. Like I used to read the movie pages, like the reviews and the showtimes and stuff in the Providence Journal in like 2003. And so I remember like Cold Mountain. I remember The Lovely, the Cole Porter biopic, like just stuff that no one has thought about since then. For me, is like the pinnacle of like an adult film that like is prestigious, and that like when I get old enough, I'll be allowed to see these movies like The Lovely.
Yeah, I had the same thing when I'm in high school. I remember I'm like now watching actively on YouTube reviewers and film channels. And I remember like, so there's this weird thing between like 2014 to 2018. I can basically, any given weekend, I can probably tell you what's in the top 5 for that weekend, like domestic gross, like at the box office. It's just so weird because I was just watching channels that broke down like, these are the top 5 movies this weekend, and here's how they performed, all that.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've been playing a game online made by the guys who do the Blank Check podcast.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like some Griffin Newman shit.
They made that on their channel where it's they talk about they do the box office game, and they've now made it basically like a Wordle each day. And anything before like 2010, I can't get it.
Right.
But if it's like that range of like 2015 to 2019, I know it instantly. Like
that's so funny.
Nothing on it. But with that all said, I think it's time that we should talk about one of the most famous movies ever made, Top Gun.
So, wow, is it really one of the most famous movies ever made?
I would probably argue it is. I mean,
it's definitely iconic. Like, I don't know. I can't think of like fighter pilots without thinking of Top Gun.
That's where I feel like I can't think of like, I don't know if there's a more iconic Tom Cruise character than Maverick outside of like Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible.
Yeah, it is. It was sort of one of his first like iconic sort of action roles, right?
Yeah, and for me, it's just like Tom Cruise is probably one of the most famous actors we've ever had, and this might be his most famous movie.
Yeah, but I mean, by that measure, like, yeah, it's up there.
But with that all said, I'm going to jump into it. So I'm going to do the film historian real briefly on that. And I got my notes for that, Spencer. So if you'll indulge me for just a few moments, I'll go as quick as I can. For everyone who does not know the film Top Gun, the film follows hotshot pilot Maverick, who is sent to Top Gun Naval Fighter Weapons School to become the best of the best combat flyers. There, his reckless attitude and cocky demeanor puts him at odds with his fellow pilots. But Maverick isn't only competing to be at the top, he is also fighting for the attention of his beautiful flight instructor, Charlotte Blackwood. And I'm going to switch into my regular glasses so I can actually read my notes.
You got me thinking about Top Gun, but pirates instead.
I know. That's fun. A movie I'm really interested in seeing. The film stars Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis 1 year post her role in Witness, Val Kilmer, Anthony Edwards, Tom Skerritt, and Meg Ryan. It is directed by the late great Tony Scott, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. Bruckheimer and Simpson the year before having produced Beverly Hills Cop. This was Scott's second directorial feature following the 1983 film The Hunger starring David Bowie, and his career skyrockets from here. Within the decade of Top Gun's release, he goes on to direct Beverly Hills Cop 2, Days of Thunder, The Last Boy Scout, True Romance, and Crimson Tide, to name a few. And when this film was released in May of 1986, it received mixed reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 2.5 out of 4 stars, saying the dogfights are absolutely the best since Clint Eastwood's aerial scenes in Firefox. But look out for the scenes where the people talk to one another. So pretty savage review from Ebert. And his co-partner, Gene Siskel, actually gave it a much more positive review, saying the aerial sequences are thrilling while remaining coherent as any ever put on film. So in this case, coherency is enough to give it a 3-star review. So fair to him. This film's huge. It's the number 1 grossing film of 1986. Domestic haul of 177 million. Paramount that year ends up having 3 of the top 5 highest grossing films, with Crocodile Dundee coming in number 2 and Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, coming in number 5. The soundtrack for Top Gun was the best-selling soundtrack of 1986 and spent 5 non-consecutive weeks number 1 on the U.S. charts And of course, this film, Top Gun, spawns a sequel, Top Gun Maverick, which is coming out May 27th, so this Friday. With that all said, that is the film history of Top Gun. And yeah, let's just kind of begin there. Spencer, this was your first time watching the film, right?
That's right. I was aware of it. You know, everyone's heard of Top Gun, but I've never sat down and watched it until last night. So I'm fresh off my first viewing, and I'm still processing.
I To me, it's kind of crazy that you had never seen Top Gun before this. Was it just one of those ones where you just missed it? You just kept missing it? Or was there options to see it and you're just like, I'm not going to?
It had never come up. I had never turned down the opportunity to watch Top Gun, but at the same time, I had never chosen to turn it on. And it's maybe that I don't really like. Well, we'll get into me not liking planes later, but
Okay.
I was glad that I finally watched it because now I know what people mean when they say goose and whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of references that have made it over to the cultural zeitgeist. And with that, let's just kind of start with our hills to die on, just so we can get an idea of where the discussion's going to go and some of our general thoughts on it. So I'll let you, Spencer, start with your hill.
My hill that I'm going to die on, that I alluded to a minute ago, is that planes do not make for good cinema. I had no idea what was happening in the action sequences. I think that it's very difficult to have a sense of scale when you're just shooting planes flying in the sky. People have masks on their faces. I couldn't see Tom Cruise's weird teeth. And I basically had no idea what was happening whenever they were off the ground. Which was a shame because I was like, oh, these action sequences, like I know they're really acclaimed, like people love it. It's like a classic, like adrenaline kind of thriller action movie. And I was up there and I was like, okay, so there's like one guy going like this and there's another guy going like this and they're going really fast and they got to do something. I was just finding it difficult to follow. And I know that's that might be a hot take because I know people really like the action sequences here, but like they were not vibing with me specifically.
I think the thing with the action sequences is they're so heavily dependent on plane combat that it's really easy not to understand what's going on in the different maneuvers because they're thrown around terms and you're just like, what does that mean? I think first time I watched it, I didn't realize there were two people in one plane.
Oh, I didn't realize that until the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, so Goose is flying another plane and then Maverick's flying another fighter. And then I'm like watching this movie, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're both in the same plane, which is weird because I'm like, there's never a camera angle that shows both of them in it.
Exactly.
It always looks like there's one person in one and then the other person in that. I will agree with you that I think the action might be my least favorite part of the movie, and I'll give my hill to die on right now. I said a little bit in disagreement with you. I said it's one of the easiest movies to like simply because it's endlessly quotable, charismatic performances all around, action sequences that are riveting and fast paced, a great soundtrack. And the reason I love this movie is it's unintentionally maybe one of the funniest movies to come out of the 1980s. I can't get enough of the comedy in this movie that is never written in the script.
Right.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, like we talked about the comedy. I was just laughing my ass off at all the like shirtless scenes.
They're
like,
the best.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get into that later, but like every time there was just really gratuitous, like sweaty men, I was like, yeah, right on.
Yeah, there's been a lot of think pieces written about this movie's homoerotic undertones.
Yeah, that was my first note.
I can't wait to get into those. But what we'll start with is let's get into the main part of the film discussion. And I always just start with the opening scene, because that's supposed to be where the filmmaker is selling you on this is what this movie is and get on board. And the first one is basically the plane going off and flying off. And it's the first combat scene with Maverick and with his co-pilot Cougar.
Right.
is
This
his
is where
name.
Cougar has his little freak out.
Yeah, this is where he has the breakdown. So it's supposed to establish who Maverick is as a character, this kind of hotshot guy. And what I will say instantly about this film is you're supposed to feel the adrenaline pretty quick. And I feel it because of how loud the engine is roaring. It's enough to kind of just get you in. And I have the same issue with you where the action scenes are to me the least dynamic parts of this movie. Simply because at times I just don't fully understand what is going on. But what this opening sequence does so well is it sets the movie up with the fast paced adrenaline feel. Uh, of course, you have the soundtrack accompanying it with Highway to the Danger Zone, the first time we're hearing that, as well as the Top Gun anthem. And it works just due to the visceral feeling of if even listening it with headphones on, you can feel like your body's shaking when the engine kicks in. And
Absolutely.
it's just a visceral experience. It's like you instantly it's just adrenaline because of how loud and powerful it is that you're just like, that's kind of crazy how fast they're going. And knowing that they're in the air doing this stuff. Of course, Tom Cruise isn't quite doing the stunts just yet. I know he's up in the air doing a little bit, but he's not quite flying the planes like he'll be doing in the latter half of his career. But yeah, for all of those reasons, I think it gets the pace pretty off right from the get-go. They understand like this is going to be the type of movie you're getting, and this is the type of look we're presenting, and this is Tony Scott's direction, just kind of at full.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it sets up right immediately. It's got the anticipation of it, right? Like you see the planes, you see them like kind of getting the planes ready in this beautiful, like almost sunset-y type warm colorscape. You hear Danger Zone, you're like, okay, like let's get into it. Let's see what's going to happen up in the air here. And then that was all a bit of a letdown for me. But I really liked that sense of anticipation. I was like, cool, let's start flying. And
Yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah, you're in. That's how I felt too, where I'm just like, there's an excitement that never kind of comes to fruition for me fully with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like I said, because it's an action movie, and the action sequences to me are the worst part of the movie. So it's an interesting dynamic that this movie has. Before we go any farther with our film discussion, I did have this category that I did tell you about, but didn't give you the questions ahead of time, so I could get your honest reaction live on air. I call this part of the show subjective, objective questions and answers. And that is, I am going to give you an objective question to answer with a subjective answer.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
So, who gives the best performance? Top of your head.
It's Cruise.
Who is your favorite character?
Ice.
What is your favorite scene?
Besides the volleyball scene, the Great Balls of Fire scene. That one's really sweet.
Who has more romantic chemistry? Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis, Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, or Tom Cruise and Anthony Edwards?
In my notes, I have this movie is an epic will they won't they between Maverick and Iceman. Like, God, at the end when they're like grinning at each other, I'm like, you guys want to kiss? And like, we all want to see that. So like, just do it.
Can I tell you the best part of their true dynamic is whenever Iceman will just bite? Just at it. I'm like, this is fantastic.
Kilmer is the only one who I can think of from that era who like is basically as charismatic as Tom Cruise. Like he could have played Maverick and I think the movie would not have suffered. So could Meg Ryan, but you know.
I agree. And it's the thing with him in this movie. It's so interesting that he's kind of forced to make this movie by Paramount due to his contract. He doesn't sign on for this movie. And from my understanding, this isn't a film that he particularly wanted to work on. And it ends up becoming one of his most famous roles to date with Iceman. Next question I have for you. Is Top Gun the best movie soundtrack to come out of the 1980s?
I really like... So when I was watching it, the first 5 seconds that the love theme comes on, take my breath away. Yeah. The first 5 seconds that comes on, I'm like, I really like this. And I Shazam it. And I'm like, great. I like add it to my like favorite songs playlist. And I looked it up afterwards and I was like, oh, this song won Best Original Song. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I was like, wow, like, what is this hidden gem in Top Gun? It's like this really cool, like, kind of Twin Peaksy sort of bass. Like, we got a rising synths and stuff. I was like, this is amazing. And then it's like an Oscar-winning song. But I got to think about that. But the soundtrack is obviously like a big selling point. The Kenny Loggins stuff, you know, that's fun and cheesy. But that one Berlin song that's like an all-timer.
Yeah, I think I have to go no just because The Breakfast Club exists. Breakfast
Sure.
and Ferris Bueller is just like the two that I'm like, I would probably put those without even thinking about it, where it's like those two are above it. But Top Gun has to be up there. And finally, the last question for you. Would waiting 10 years and letting Michael Bay direct this movie have made it better?
No. I think it would have been. I think it would have been like an interchangeable. It would have been like Pearl Harbor. You know, it would have been like some interchangeable, like forgettable Michael Bay thing because it's too in his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
like, he would be on autopilot.
I agree. The reason I ask this is because, of course, Jerry Bruckheimer goes on to have a really famous career with Michael Bay, with The Rock, and leading into the Transformers era. I believe Bruckheimer is still one of the producers on those. And in that opening sequence, you really get to see, I think, how much Bruckheimer's style influences Michael Bay with just, the aerial shots of the plane with the sunset over it or the sunrise over it. And you're just like, that's a really classic, like Michael Bay action scene. And the music just feels it. And I think this is the inception of what will become Michael Bay. And there's a part of me that I would agree with you, where I'm like, I don't think Michael Bay could direct this movie quite like Tony Scott, because I think Tony Scott is a really underrated action director. But there's also a part of me that thinks that Michael Bay could have gone a lot of the fun aspects of this movie and unintentional comedy also pretty correct. Like, there's a part of me that thinks of The Rock and thinks of those action sequences and thinks maybe he could have pulled this off, but I would typically agree with you.
Michael Bay, I feel like I feel as though he does a lot of like really cheap punchlines and like cheesy jokes and stuff in a way that Top Gun doesn't as much. Like, Top Gun earns its humor, I think, for the most part, in a way that Michael Bay might have gone for a cheap laugh instead.
I think when Michael Bay does humor the best is when he allows the actors themselves for their personality and charisma to come through. Like, I'm thinking like Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery specifically in The Rock. Like, their humor throughout the movie is really funny, but that's because he's kind of just trusting Nicolas Cage. And I don't know if you saw it recently, Ambulance, that he directed. Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie is legit crazy in it. And the humor that he has is fully based on my belief that I think Jake Gyllenhaal was just improvising on set and Michael Bay never cut the camera. And there's a part of me that wonders, would he have tried adding the humor, or would he have just allowed the personality of Tom Cruise to dominate this movie?
Tom Cruise, he's got personality, but he's not funny. You can't let Tom Cruise just riff. Like, he's too alien. He's too odd.
I'm going to push back just solely on the basis of Tropic Thunder. That I'm like, could this guy just riff?
That is sort of the exception that proves the rule, isn't it?
Yeah, because in that one, it is. I think his decisions in the movie make that movie, where it's like, I'm going to have fat hands and I want to dance to rap. Like, and that wasn't in the script. And Ben Stiller's like, all right, we'll just trust you.
That said, like, it isn't like a safe comedy space though, Tropic Thunder. You know, like, if he's is action oriented, I don't know if he has that impulse. At least he hasn't shown it in other movies to me.
That's fair. And he's so young in this movie that I don't know if he's developed enough as an actor.
He's a baby. He's like 2 years out of Risky Business, in which he's like literally a high schooler.
Yeah. And it's crazy to me watching Top Gun and seeing him and being like, this guy is somehow looks like he hasn't aged yet, has somehow also aged. Like, I'm just looking at him and there's times where I'm like, oh yeah, that's what Tom Cruise looks like now. And I'm like, no, but he has like, he's obviously about to turn 60. So I like, there's like this it's uncanny valley for me where I'm like, something's wrong, but I can't quite point to what is wrong. That Scientology stuff he's doing.
Yes, there's something to it. Yeah.
Like, I will not look that good at 60. I don't look that good at my age. I don't look as good as he does now at 24.
Very few of us do.
Yeah.
But like, it's not a hot
mhm.
take to say that he's like, you know, probably our greatest movie star currently. But like, it's funny to see him like before he's like, as he's tapping into that, which he is doing in Top Gun. Like Top Gun is him reaching sort of that pinnacle of like, oh, I can be here. The camera can like rest on me and I can look around and I can like give sort of a weird, like broad grin and have it still read as real because you trust me.
Yeah, totally agree with you. There's something about him that when you see it, you're like, this guy's just a natural at charisma. This guy has it for days, which is then so interesting because I think what he does in the latter half of his career, which he does not do at the beginning of half, he tries to be a sex symbol really early on. I think basically through the end of the 1990s with Eyes Wide Shut, I think is where it kind of like there's a part of the audience where it's like we're disconnecting with this guy. He's too alien to us. But at the beginning, I really feel like they're trying to build him up as like, not only is he this great action star, he's along there with the leading men of like a Humphrey Bogart, just the most charismatic, devilish, just any woman will fall for him. And he's going to be like the next romantic comedy lead and the biggest action star. And it never fully takes off with him. And in this movie, it's the same shades where you're just like, there is like a level of romance that he cannot tap into.
He is a deeply unsexy actor.
It's so weird how someone can be that handsome and not like use their handsomeness to show sexiness.
No, it's a zero-sum game for him. It's like he has all of his, it's like the Venn diagram, right? He has all of like his eggs in the charisma basket and none in like the he's not a smoldery guy. His grin is really goofy. Like that's why, I mean, recently, like he's been doing pretty much exclusively big action stuff, which is right in his wheelhouse. And I think the reason why Eyes Wide Shut works, to go back to that, is because he's the outsider in this sexy world. Like he's approaching these, you know, situations and we're like, no, man, like you don't belong there. And he's like, yeah, I don't really belong here. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah. And it's like, it's so interesting watching him in this movie, like trying to fake it. And that's what it feels like the whole time with his relationship with McGillis, who is, again, also just out of the 1980s, one of the sexiest women to come out of the 1980s with her career and just her charisma. And, you know, we see her a year earlier with Harrison Ford in Witness, where they have great chemistry. And then it cuts to this film and it's just like, why are these two people not connecting in a believable way? And that's like the biggest disconnect with this movie as well, where it's just, you're watching and you're like, something's off-putting.
Yeah, their romance was definitely the part that like bumped for me the most. I blame that also. I mean, not only is their chemistry not great, I think both the performances are okay, but I agree that there's no spark between them. And I blame that also sort of on the screenplay because I think their relationship is paced weirdly.
It's also forced because there's the whole issue when the movie comes out and they're doing the first screenings of it. The audience is like, okay, well, there needs to be more of a romantic presence. So that sex scene is shot 5 months after production has ended.
Whoa.
And it's very clear because what Tony Scott talked about with this movie is the actors look different 5 months after production because they're filming different roles. So they have to use the black and blue silhouettes to kind of cover the fact that these actors aren't the characters anymore.
That's awesome.
It's also just like, it's this weird dynamic with Cruise's character where he's the most hotshot pilot and yet he's having the most vanilla sex possible.
Well, yeah, his adrenaline only comes out in that one area, I guess.
Yeah, and there's so many just weird decisions made about it, and we're just jumping into the sex sequence because it is like the funniest part of the movie to me. Like, when I asked you the question, favorite scene, it has to be the 10-minute sequence going from the volleyball sequence to the first like rendition of Take My Breath Away instrumental to the point where they talk. to the point where he runs away from her and she chases him down to the point where they make love in this movie. That whole 10-minute sequence in the film is spectacular to me. Not necessarily out of the quality of greatness. It's a rewatchability thing for me where I can sit there and I can watch that scene and I could think this is some of the most entertaining stuff in a movie because none of it really feels cohesive to one another. And you're right. The issue is you right away get this disconnect in the fact that Cruise has way more chemistry with Val Kilmer in the volleyball scene.
Absolutely. Like that scene, the volleyball scene pops.
Yeah.
Like everyone's oiled up, everyone's diving all over the place. They're like doing these like really intense like shoulder hugs and arm elbow whatevers, and you're like, okay, like, you know, we're getting somewhere here. This is leading to something. And then it goes back to Charlie, Kelly McGillis, and you're like, we just kind of went from 60 to like 10 here, you know?
And it's also the weird thing is like it's a PG movie.
Is it really?
So, yeah, it's PG.
God,
now,
true,
weird. This is 1985. Though that means PG-13 exists because Temple of Doom's come out. So I don't know. Yeah, they could have given this movie a PG-13, and I think a PG rating obviously inherently hurts a sex scene.
I don't. Yeah,
you can't show.
Should be rated R.
Least. Or at the minimum PG-13. And in this one, it's like a kid-friendly sex scene. I described it when I was writing my notes on it, that it feels like a scene where it's the discussion of the birds and the bees, but it's like in the broadest terms. So like, oh yeah, there's a lot of cuddling, there's kissing, and you're like both topless, like on top of each other.
Right, and then you just do that for a little while, and then you're done.
Yeah, like, and it just something happens.
It's very clinical. Yeah,
that's what this scene.
It's definitely
feels
a sex scene. Yeah, by someone who doesn't know what sex is.
Yeah,
which might be Tom Cruise. I'm not convinced Tom Cruise knows what sex is.
I don't know if he has sex. That's always been the thing with the guy, where it's just like I don't know if that's something that interests him.
Yeah, and like, but their whole relationship. So go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, their whole relationship is just so. It's like I said, it's like weirdly paced. It's just, you think it's setting it up to be this whole will they, won't they, like a whole like, oh, she's his instructor, but he's really gunning for it and she's really attracted to him. But like maybe they'll get together maybe the end will be them finally getting together. But instead they get together. Like she has like one moment where she's like, I can't do this.
I'm your teacher.
Yeah. And then he's like, yeah, but, and she's like, yeah, but whatever.
Fair point.
Right. And then 10 minutes later, they're like in a relationship. And then it seems like they've been in a relationship for ages. When they have the scene with Goose and his wife at the piano bar, like they're just chatting as though they've been like double dating for years. Mm-hmm. It's like they didn't write the relationship to progress externally, at least in a way that relationships usually progress, or how we're expecting a relationship to progress.
Yeah, and it's that point you brought up is a great point, because that was also one of the ones I brought up in my notes too, where it was just like the whole dynamic is the will they, won't they. It starts because of the fact that she's his teacher.
Classic. Great.
Like,
love the setup.
Yeah, that's the ultimate one. And you're like, okay, she really loses that clause really quickly. Like it's just like, was that really ever something you really believed in? Because I mean, within like 2 seconds of Tom Cruise giving you that smile, you're like, but I'm willing to drop it. And the weird thing also is there's no repercussions, which I guess is also a factor of the 1980s, which probably would not fly today in 2022, where it's like there's an inherent ickiness factor of instructor/student.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a power dynamic.
There's a power dynamic that's just never explored in this movie. And at times it feels like they're going to. And then you're right. Like I said, they just drop it because they're like, we need Tom Cruise to fall in love with this character, which is a setup I really like of this movie. I really like the Righteous Brothers song, You've Lost That Love and Feeling, when they perform it to her at the bar. I think that's a really cute scene. I think it's a great scene where we also get to see like Goose literally as his wingman in the air, and then also his wingman in real life.
Yeah,
so it's
cute.
A great exploration between those two characters. It's a really great introduction for their relationship. Kind of who this character of Maverick is, where he's just so unafraid and unabashed throughout it. And like I said, from there on, their relationship, it's not that it even necessarily never works. I buy into these two actors for the most part, but then when they start getting really romantic with each other, whether it's the sex scene or whether it's just them being more intimate, it never fully connects. And one last note on the sex scene, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I have never seen anything like somebody licking the other person's tooth during sex.
Yeah, that's what Tom Cruise thinks sex is.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest shots in the film. I'm just like, why aren't they just closing their mouth, or like why is the tongue connecting there? Or yeah, it's just really non-passionate. And there's also just this weird thing with Cruise where she's 5'10", he's 5'7", but throughout the whole film, he has to be taller than her. And it's again a scene that we see in the sex scene framed out where he has to be like above her, even though he's shorter. So there's just like this weird proportions where nothing's like connecting technically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're actually doing this like 6 feet kind of behind each other, you know, like so the depth of field can make it look like they're the same size.
Yeah, it's the same issue with that movie Showgirls, where it's just like the dynamics and the physics to what you're doing right now actually like don't line up.
Yeah, Showgirls leans in. I like Showgirls more than this movie. Like it leans into that just insane cartoon. I mean, it's like intentionally funny. Verhoeven doesn't do anything unintentionally funny.
I agree. He makes this movie with tongue in cheek aspects.
Yeah, Verhoeven could have done Top Gun. I would watch that.
I'd watch anything.
Michael Ironside, he's in it.
He is in this movie really briefly. It's really early role for him, I think, though it's also hard to tell because I can never tell how old the guy is.
Yeah, he looks good in this. He looks young.
Yeah, who is he in this movie again? I'm trying to picture who his character is because I remember reading he's in the IMDb.
His name is Jester, I think.
Is he the guy that has the freak out who spills the coffee all over himself?
No, but I do like that guy. That guy might be my favorite supporting character.
That guy is the ultimate like side character in a movie.
Yeah, he's the Mike Cabbage's guy of this movie. Yeah,
he comes in for just the true sequences just to steal it. Of him just spilling coffee both times, really overacting and cheesing it up. But it's fantastic. So I think we've touched enough on the actual relationship between our supposed love interest, though I say supposed knowing that there's much more interesting love interest in this movie.
We all know what's going on here.
Yeah, we all know the subtext that's being written that Tom Cruise is afraid to embrace. But one last note on it, I do completely agree with you. Take My Breath Away I legitimately like this song a lot. And I know it kind of gets hated on, I think kind of due to the overexposure and the fact that this song is just, this scene is so memorable for kind of like being ranked as one of the worst sex scenes in a movie that it's just like the song gets associated with it, completely disattached from the scene itself. I think the song's actually pretty great.
That's so funny. I didn't know about any of that sort of stigma that goes along with it, because
I was reading it up on it again because I remember I'm pretty sure like Collider and Hollywood Reporter, when they, sometimes do their rankings and they're like the worst sex scenes in movies, Top Gun is always on there.
And do they shit on Take My Breath Away while they do that?
They'll usually throw at least a quick jab or two, at least at some of the lyrics of it.
Well, but as someone who came into it like totally not knowing the song, like I said, within 5 seconds of it playing, he's walking into the house and I got Shazam up. So like, so I like had no idea about any of the weird, random like sex stuff to come or the kind of the popular thinking around this song, but like purely on a musical basis, like it's exactly my shit. I was vibing.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way about it. So let's jump back into the more, we'll call it brotherly relationship with Maverick and Goose in it. We already talked about the opening sequence of it. It's so interesting to just watch two characters. And again, it's a weird thing with the script where they're getting chastised for what they did in the air that caused Cougar to leave. And then he's like, and I'm promoting you guys. And you're like, wait, why? Like, you guys are reckless. You're irresponsible. I can't trust you up there. So I'm sending you to the best military.
God damn it, you're good. It's that classic dynamic. Like, you're a hotshot rookie cop, but you're so damn good at being a cop.
Yeah, it is that classic dynamic. And the whole time I'm just watching and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if the military would reward these two types of hotshots where it's just like there's such a danger to Maverick in particular, where you're just like, this guy's a little too hot-headed, and he supposedly has this family dynamic, or not family dynamic, but this family history in the film where it's just like, would they trust this guy to be, I guess, the calm, cool headed pilot they need in there? But you're right, it's to establish he's a hotshot and he's going to be a hotshot throughout the whole movie. And in that way it works. There's scenes in this movie where I think at times I wanted a little bit more repercussions for Maverick's actions.
Oh, constantly. He's an asshole.
He's kind of the worst throughout this movie, and just
Iceman is right. Like, justice for Iceman.
Yeah, because he's kind of supposed to be the antagonist to Tom Cruise's character, but the whole time he's making really logical points. Like, I can't trust you up there.
Yeah, 100%.
And I mean, that's the flyby sequence is just like, listen, I've worked with veterans. I worked at the veteran service office for the county. Of any group of people I ever met, protocol is the most important thing to them. There is no room for shenanigans, for ego, for essentially the flyboy nature of this character. And it's just like, because there's too much at stakes. And at times throughout this movie, I'm just like, yeah, they really need to be chastising the character of Maverick throughout more times. But of course, because he's our hero, we have to root for our protagonists. So we have to, like, when he does the flyby, it's supposed to be the scene where we're like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of like a rule follower in real life, but like I was watching that and I was like, no, man, you're such an asshole. Like, no wonder everyone's mad at you all the time. Like, you can't not be doing this.
Mm.
And like, yeah, we got a lot of scenes that everyone's getting mad at them mainly at Maverick for doing insane, dangerous stuff. And they're like, but you're so good, we gotta keep you around. You got it, kid. Like, you're a genius up there. And like, we sort of have to have that because as non-pilots, we don't really have any context for what he's doing in the air. Like, we don't see what he's doing up there and we're like, that's a really strategic move up there, kid. Like, nice work. Like, so we have to get those scenes of his superiors being like, you got the goods. And then by proxy, we're just like, oh, I guess he's got the goods. Like, that's a fun dynamic.
Which one you're talking about that scene, I was thinking of like a film that does it really similarly, that uses kind of the dogfighting styles really well, and that's like Star Wars, the 1977 Star Wars. We know what's going on in the action, and a lot of that's because Han and Luke are talking to each other throughout those scenes, or Luke's having his own kind of internal dialogue aloud, or we hear Obi-Wan's voice. And I thought that was an interesting point of the movie where I'm like, that would have been just an easy way to kind of help establish the audience of what's going on up there, is having Tom Cruise and the other actors up there be a little bit more vocal in their performances at that scene, because for a few moments throughout, like specifically the final battle, they're kind of just like going like, come on, or just completely silent. And I just remember thinking like, okay, if he said like, okay, you have to go down so you can do a spin or something like that, where like Han Solo is like, oh, I have to avoid the asteroids. So I have to jump into light speed, or whatever he does in like Empire, Star Wars. Like, we can follow that because we're like, okay, this is what he's doing with the Falcon. And what I found in Top Gun is I'm like, I don't know how he's flying the plane. I just am being told it's some amazing fighting. And because we see him shooting down the enemies. So that was a part of it where I'm like, that could have been a really easy fix for it, because I agree with you. There's a disconnect when he's up there.
It definitely does.
Don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it definitely like gets across that dynamic that they're talking about when they say like, when he says, "Oh, you have no time to think up there if you think you're dead." Like, that I get, because everything, like, I get why they shot it and wrote it like that, because everything is so fast, everything is so blink of an eye. You don't have time to plan, right? Everything's spontaneous. But yeah, I definitely agree that they let us in a little bit more. And there's also just no real way to shoot it in a compelling way to me, because like you were saying, you don't get the shot of like them both sitting in the plane. You just get the straight on, he's flying with the mask over his face, which also like kind of bugs me because I'm like, I wish I could just get a sense of like more of his. Tom Cruise is a great face actor. Like you can tell what he's thinking. You can tell when he's intense, and you can't really get that when he has his oxygen mask on. So you get that shot straight on, and then you get like the planes just whizzing by, and or you get kind of the pilot's eye view of like what's going on ahead. But I don't know, without sequencing those in a very deliberate way, yeah, it just kind of gets lost. It gets muddled to me.
Yeah, and it's something that I think the new Top Gun Maverick supposedly really fixes on, because I don't know if you've seen the reviews for this film. They're raving about this film, and basically everyone I've seen is calling it a far superior film to the original, and specifically in the action sequences. And based on the trailer, I think they're talking or addressing some of the issues that you and I have with it, where it's like, I think we see Tom Cruise doing it more. And I think that's also by design of the fact that we, as an audience, just also know Tom Cruise is actually doing that. So they want to show that off. They want to make sure it's like, oh no, this is Tom Cruise like flying a plane in Tahoe, and we're seeing the full effects of that. Because you're right, in that end sequence, I really lose interest because it kind of feels repetitive.
Definitely
I'm like,
repetitive.
isn't he just spinning? Like, isn't he just going upside down and then back down and then just shooting?
Yeah.
Like that kind of felt like the whole premise of
Yeah.
the action scene. But I know it's so much more dynamic to that. And I have friends who are in the Air Force who, you know, they swear by these aerial scenes. But I'm like, yeah, but that's because you have an understanding. That would be like me. That would be like someone like you making a basketball film without explaining the rules of basketball, and you're seeing these players do crazy stuff, but you don't really understand how it's being played. But then someone like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is like, this is the best basketball film I've ever seen for the way they play defense or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but I don't understand what that means because the film never showed me what that is. So I have a disconnect that someone who has more experience with it knows.
Right. You have to be really deliberate in how you shoot and edit these scenes so that they're comprehensible to someone who doesn't know. Otherwise, you just get like a little bit of, you know, a thrill when you just see something big go by fast. But like, that's not going to sustain you for like 4 pretty similar action sequences.
Yeah. And I feel like the reason Top Gun has become so famous isn't even necessarily for the action scenes. I think when people think of it, they think of like the Highway to the Danger Zone song. They think of the Maverick and Goose singing in the bar. They think of the Iceman Tom Cruise dynamic in it. I don't really hear people when they reference Top Gun, they never really reference the aerial fights. They reference the characters of Top Gun.
No, Top Gun is a vibe.
Exactly. It's that feeling that you get when you watch Top Gun. You just feel good.
Right.
You feel that adrenaline.
Because you get to be put in Tom Cruise's extremely confident shoes for 2 hours.
Yeah,
and like,
exactly.
So him walking around there, you know, strutting around the base is like really fun because you're like, oh yeah, he's the top dog here.
It's a charismatic built movie where it is, we need charismatic personalities to really deliver the movie. And that's totally okay for a film to have. Like, Top Gun works because Tom Cruise, Val Kilmer, Anthony Edwards, Kelly McGillis, Meg Ryan, even what's his name? Where's his name? I have it on my other page. The sergeant, Tom Skerritt.
Yeah,
they're all just super charismatic. Tom Skerritt spouting one of the best mustaches, I think, just in film. I mean, that's
he's
a great
really
mustache.
good. I'm unfamiliar with him, but his dynamic with Maverick is one that I didn't see coming, which I liked a lot.
The big scene with him is where Viper, reveals Duke Mitchell's heroism to Mitchell, because obviously you know it's coming the whole time. They're teasing the fact that like this character's backstory is classified, and you know at some point you're like, okay, well this has to become declassified, otherwise why bring it up? And when they bring it up, I think it does contextualize Maverick as a character really well, and kind of gives him the inspiration to do what he does in the final action sequence. But before we, I don't want to talk about the action sequences anymore. I want to talk volleyball.
Oh, I'm all about volleyball, baby.
Best volleyball scene in a movie, point blank.
Maybe the only volleyball scene I could think of.
You could be right, but it would still be the best. I don't. If there was one volleyball sequence in film history, this is the best. And if there was 1,000, this would still be the best. I don't care. Nothing comes close to me than Playing with the Boys by Kenny Loggins.
Playing with the Boys.
And
you can't name a song that and not be like winking. Like, this movie knows what it is.
But I don't think it does.
How could it not?
I think it's largely based off the fact that it doesn't know what it is, because I don't think Tom Cruise is in on the joke.
No,
and that's almost the best part of the movie. Where
I
Tom
think everyone
Cruise
else knows
doesn't
what the
understand
movie is but
what
him.
it is.
Yeah.
Like Val Kilmer, I think clearly understands what type of movie he's in.
He's a very smart man.
I think Anthony Edwards understands it. Tom Cruise is so believing of his own, like, I'm the sexiest guy in the world and we're going to do this. And there's, again, with this thing, it's not sexual appeal in this, but it's just that alien decisions that Tom Cruise makes that you're like, something's like off-putting, but I really like it, but I don't understand why I like it. I've played beach volleyball before. I don't know if you have. I have never had the inclination to, one, wear jeans at the beach, or two, play volleyball in jeans at a sandy beach.
God, well, now I want to now. Like, that's my goal for summer 2022. It's hot volleyball summer.
It's hot volleyball summer, and the best thing is none of the other characters are wearing jeans. They're wearing beach appropriate attire. Like,
right.
One guy's wearing pants, but at least they're sweatpants. Like, Tom Cruise is in Levi's.
Oh, it's so good.
Levi's.
I just watched Lost, and Sawyer is constantly diving into the ocean in just jeans. It's like his thing. And like Tom Cruise, we see Tom Cruise in this. My girlfriend and I are like, oh my God, he's pulling a Sawyer. It felt so good to see someone else doing that.
It's so, I don't know how to describe my feelings for seeing it, but every time there's like a little bit of a cringe factor for me where I'm just like, that has to be the most uncomfortable thing to be doing. Like, playing that intensive beach volleyball in jeans.
Can you imagine all the sand getting up in like the pant leg?
And it gets
like
stuck.
He's chafed.
Yeah, it gets stuck because at least sweatpants, you got the little bit of a movement. It closes off at the bottom usually.
Yeah.
Like, there's ways. Jeans, I'm just like, also because they're at the beach, you're assuming there's a chance they get splashed or even just slightly wet. Those don't dry.
No, jeans take forever to dry. Notably,
that is famously the most uncomfortable thing you could wear to the beach.
Oh my God. And I love at the end when like Maverick's trying to leave and Goose is like, no, just one more game. Like, how many games do you think they've played that afternoon?
Based on the sweat, it feels like they've been out there all day.
Like, you played do you play to 21 in volleyball? They've gone through a number of
volleyball,
games.
I'm assuming they're going to about 21.
Oof.
Which means you're probably, if it's that intense, because, usually for like amateurs like us, we're going to just, someone's going to get a good hit and someone on the other side's not going to hit it. For these guys, they're diving.
They're good.
Like, they're doing everything they can to make sure the ball doesn't touch the ground.
They regularly practice.
Yeah, which means getting to 21 points is not quick.
No, it's not quick because the defense is strong.
Yeah, and
it's a war of attrition here. Yeah,
it's going on, and you think that if they've won one, that they have also won one, and that it's just like it's going back and forth, and it's like, oh, if we leave now, they get the upper hand.
Yeah,
like we officially forfeit our chance to win this off.
It's like 5 p.m. because dinner's at 5:30, right? So it's like 5:15. Like, he's got to get over. He doesn't shower, notably, but like, disgusting. But then he has to bike over there, right? So I mean, they've been playing since like 10, 11 in the morning. Like, they are really going for it.
I think the scene that like alienates me more than him wearing jeans is him not drying off with a towel to put his shirt on.
Yeah. Him
just sweating and just putting on his shirt and jacket. I'm like, why?
That's movie magic. Like, that's just Tom Cruise being charismatic.
Yeah.
If Tom Cruise toweled off, he would not be as charismatic. It's because he makes decisions like that make him such an effective movie star.
I like it. I like the theory. I really like that theory. I think it's gross.
Oh,
And
100%.
it's gross because they also address it in the movie. Where they're like, he hasn't showered.
He's like, I'd like to shower. And she's like, no, you can't. I'm your instructor. And it's like, damn, okay.
Yeah, it's that whole sequence, like I said, because then we get into like he goes to her house, we get the beginning of Take My Breath Away. We already talked about what happens. Or what the film tells us what happens, but what we as an audience know is impossible.
we know Tom Cruise is not up to that.
I would honestly not be surprised if he tried hiring like a stunt actor. Like that, I think that is the only time Tom Cruise uses a stunt actor is for sex scenes. It's the only time he's like, bring them in.
He hired the stunt double, but like just to ask him like what sex is. He's like, no, I still want to do this, but can you just demonstrate it for me? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here?
Yeah, it is probably good. Is there a documentary about Eyes Wide Shut, the making of it, and Tom Cruise like asking just like a lot of just really basic questions about sex.
Nicole Kidman has to like really patiently explain it to him, like he's 10. Yeah,
yeah. Just so this goes where? So I do what? So I touch you where? Just the line of questioning, just like a child. That's the only time he uses a stunt double. It's famously, I would bet you anything. It's the only time, and I'm glad as an actor he's finally embraced that. We as an audience have rejected him as a sex symbol, or
awesome.
Not necessarily a sex symbol, but a leading man romantic symbol.
Right.
The actual scene, like, because we're making fun of this movie a ton, obviously, which I knew we were going to do because this movie deserves to be made fun of for a lot of its choices. The scene that actually has an emotional impact, and I think they portray it really well, and it's Tom Cruise touching on something as an actor we all know is there, but it doesn't always get to show, is his dramatic chops. He's actually a really good dramatic actor. He just never chooses to do those types of roles, whether it's Eyes Wide Shut, whether it's Magnolia. He gets to show that side of him. And in this scene where Goose dies, we actually get to see Tom Cruise do something different in this movie. And he really closes off. For an actor that his whole thing in this movie is based on his charisma, we really get to see him as an actor regress and just kind of stay in like a shell shock, kind of go in on himself.
Yeah. I mean, he's got that range, you know, he can do the like I mean, he's an intense guy, right? And he can do internal stuff. Like as well as he can do any big, broad intensity. Like as long as he has that kind of fire burning, like within him somewhere, if there's something like really intense fueling him, such as, you know, the death of his best friend, like he can deliver that for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's what makes Tom Cruise the actor, essentially, is the fact that he's able to touch on those things, and that's what has given him the longevity. It's what makes him different from other action stars / movie stars who have kind of faded away with time. I mean, he's been a guy since the 80s, and he's still in 2022. He's going to open up a film that is one of the most talked about, most anticipated films. And he just had the trailer for Mission Impossible. I think it's Mission Impossible 7. He's about to turn 60. He still has it. And a lot of it is just based off the fact that, and I think it's a really easy thing to forget, Tom Cruise is an actor and he's a really good actor. He is. I think that's what makes Top Gun. We've kind of now hit on the rest of the points because we talk about the death scene, we talk about Viper, we talk about the final air combat sequence. So let's just kind of end where the movie ends. The Goose and Maverick relationship comes full throttle. You can be my wingman anytime, with that cheeky smile they both give each other.
Yep.
It's a great finale, and also a letdown because they don't kiss at that scene, which is what we're all waiting for.
Yeah. That's why we're watching the movie at this point.
If you had never shown anyone this movie, none of the subtext about this, they had no knowledge of who Tom Cruise is as a person, they would totally think they kiss at that scene.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
It's totally the scene we're all thinking it's happening. It's so cheesily delivered by Val Kilmer, which is what I love about it. The whole thing of Iceman is that he's so over the top, just like, I wouldn't call it flamboyant, but just so macho with
Chewing the
everything,
gum. Yeah.
chewing the gum, the big, like I said, my favorite is
Yeah.
with the teeth, like just the huge broad smile. All of it just really works. And then, of course, you have to get the scene where he throws Goose's dog tags overboard to show I'm moving on.
Yes, I love like a really heavy-handed visual metaphor.
I know have you seen Point Break?
No, I haven't.
Okay, one of my favorite scenes is at the end where basically one of the characters does the same thing. I'll have to have you on the show eventually to talk Point Break because you will love this movie.
Dude, I'll watch Point Break.
I guarantee you Point Break is your type of movie. But anyway, it ends with Maverick deciding to reunite with Charlie and teach at Top Gun.
It's awesome.
It's
I love
fantastic.
it. It comes full circle. And I think that's where the new one picks off, right? Like is
30 years later, Top Gun, Maverick is an instructor at Top Gun Academy, it looks like. And
it's great.
Of course, he has to go in for one last ride.
Yep.
The classic.
Get out, but they keep pulling them back in.
Yeah. So I'm wrapping this up with the film discussion. I hope you still have a few minutes. I know we're going a little long.
No, let's do it.
I have this category that I'm trying out. It's called Studio Head Whippets. And I describe it as, if you're a studio head, you watch this movie, what should be the lessons they take away from the movie, and what should be the wrong lessons they take away? I'm picturing this as like a movie head sitting there just coked out of his mind, taking the whippets, doing it all, and just being like, watching this movie like, yeah, we got to do this, or yeah, we got to do that, or no, I don't want to do that. Like, so let's start with the first one. What should they take away from this movie?
I think they did take away the right lesson from this movie, which is that you can put Tom Cruise in roles like this and he will deliver the goods. And even more broadly, like if you find the right movie star, you can make a script like this work.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's an easier said than done kind of task because movie stars like Tom Cruise don't come around very often, but like, he's continued to have a career, as we said, and like that's great because he can make a movie that is kind of this otherwise as mediocre pop. There's a reason why we're still talking about it, and it's purely on Cruise's shoulders. And so I think that if you can find a young Tom Cruise, like sign him to an undermarket deal, and like you are good to go. You are rolling in it.
Yeah, I'm glad you went the pro because I had a little bit more of negative on it. What the should takeaway is don't have a forced romance and don't shoot sex scenes if you're not willing to lose a PG rating.
It's a great point.
It's just a non-negotiable to me where it's just like, if you're going to do it, commit to it and don't commit to a relationship because the studio audience tells you that this needs it, because a lot of times they're just wrong. General movie-going audiences can just be wrong on something because they haven't seen the whole movie. And yeah, if you're going to just force something, don't have it in a movie. What is the will takeaway from this movie? The lesson that they're going to see it and they're going to be, and it's just the ones that you just know. It's like, oh, they're going to be copying this for the next 10 to 20 years where they're like, this is the thing that works. So we need to just put this in every movie.
Planes. Like literally, if I were watching this, I'd be like, wow. If I were trying to make money from this, I'd be like, wow, okay, this movie really struck a chord. What can I do that's in this movie? Ooh, flying.
Yeah.
Planes.
Mine's was that every action hero protagonist needs to play by their own rules and they need to be a hotshot. I felt like after Top Gun, because of course, I mean, that's not it. That's a really broad cliche that movies have had from the beginning. But it really feels like with Maverick, a lot of people just bought into this character. And I think they were going to learn the lesson of like, all right, we need a guy who's going to go rogue, who's going to play by his own rules, like do all of that, which of course, like I can't really back that up, but it just felt like a lesson that studios, I felt like they were chasing a character like Maverick without actually learning what made Maverick who he was. And that was Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's mine. And then to end it with the closing thoughts before we get into the great debate, I have a rating scale out of 4 stars. So I just wanted us to both give our rating for the film and just a brief reason why. So I'll go first. Out of 4 stars, I'm going 3 out of 4 stars. I like this movie a lot. I have a lot of fun with this movie. It is no means perfect, but the enjoyment that I get watching this movie saves the issues that I have in this movie.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with 2.
True.
Yep.
True.
It's a movie that sort of requires you to really be into the adrenaline thrill of big things moving really fast. And while I do like that in some situations, I just watched Speed, which I thought was
Love
awesome. Speed is like this, but like just really coherent.
Come on, bus.
Like the action sequences are so good in Speed, and so I went from that to this, and I was like, yeah, maybe if I really liked cars, planes, big machinery, I could get into kind of the main like macho thrust of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it didn't have enough other quality. Like the rest of the on the ground stuff, like Ebert said, they weren't quite compelling enough to make up for how much I wasn't connecting with the flying stuff.
Yeah, when I heard the engines roaring, I had the same reaction. Did you see the Batman?
Yeah.
The scene where the Bat engine or the Batmobile engine hits, that's what this movie is for a large part of it, but then we don't get the chase sequence that feels so excellently executed.
Right.
Like the whole reason that engine works in that movie is because it's the start, kind of the foreplay to what will become the grandiose like action sequence.
Right. Like the takeoffs were excellent. You get the scale, like you get the speed because you can see the other things around you in the landscape.
Yeah, and the jet fuel effect, or the jet is it jet fuel? What would it be
with
called?
Like the shimmering? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, where the white clouds that come out of the jet. Like that all looks really cool.
Yeah, it looks great. And then the second they take off, I'm like, all right, I'm not really going to be following this for a little while.
Yeah, it looks and sounds cool, but it never has the payoff of what an action aerial sequence we would want is. So with that, that's our closing thoughts on our discussion on it, which leads us to our final segment of the show. Spencer, you might want to plug your ears for this because I go a little loud here. Welcome to the Great Debate, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Great Debate. This is where I have a question written out. Spencer has a question written out. We're going to give each other our questions and we're going to answer them. And we can also input on what our answer would have been for our own questions. You know how this segment works. So let's start with it. I'll start first, Spencer, since you haven't done this before, so you can get an idea of the feel for it. So are you ready for the Great Debate?
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
Based on one of the most memorable scenes of this movie, which is the Righteous Brothers song that they sing to Kelly in the bar, if you, Spencer, assembled all of your buddies to sing and impress someone you had just met at a bar, what song are you choosing for you and your buddies to sing?
I was thinking about this. My first inclination was "Can't Take My Eyes Off of You," which is a great song. Like it's like perfectly romantic. You can like really yell that chorus in like a really kind of fratty way, like they do in the movie. And then I was like, oh, he kind of does that in 10 Things I Hate About You. He like already kind of beat me to that punch. So then I thought about it a little more, and I realized that "The Longest Time" by Billy Joel is actually perfect for this. You got like the barbershop quartet set up. You can get three friends. You can like do the whole backup vocals perfectly. It's got the nice like kind of puppy love situation you want in the lyrics. And actually my college roommate and I did practice singing this together. So, we already have that to fall back on. So for me, it's got to be "The Longest Time."
I like that answer a lot. I went a little bit more modern. I think 97 or 98 is when the song comes out, because I spent way too much time thinking about this question, because I would think of a song, I'm like, oh, that's a good song. And then you have to think like, what are the lyrics in it? Like, if everyone sings this together, is it going to sound too muddled? Like, you need something that's easy to sing that most people know the lyrics to. that's a little bit slower so they can actually sing along. Otherwise, if it picks up the pace a little too quick, people are going to be all over the place and it's just going to sound like a mess. So I went with I believe it's again 1997 song by the Goo Goo Dolls, Iris. I was trying to think of a song where it's just like, what song one has the romantic feels to it, and what song just also delivers on a ability to sing along with it and have that chorus that you were talking about. And I was just thinking, you start off like, forgive her forever to touch you as I know. And then you get all the guys there and they're just, and I don't want the world to see me. Because I don't think that they understand.
I know. I couldn't help myself. I had to get involved.
Yeah, just like
that chorus goes, man.
It's one of the hardest choruses that ever happened, just ever. And I just think it would be perfect. I think it might be a little too intense. The girl or guy might be a little bit too
yeah,
what are they doing?
Okay, this is bad news.
Because you can't sing that part of the song without giving it
and clean my
everything.
House. Yeah.
But yeah, so my answer is Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls.
Awesome.
So Spencer, it is time for your question.
My question is, given that we're kind of in, a Tom Cruise, every few years I feel like we go through a Tom Cruise renaissance where everyone is just like falling over themselves. So my question was, if you could make Tom Cruise do any stunt, what would it be?
I thought about this question a lot too. I really did put something, just brain power into this. I was sitting there, I'm like, do I send him to space? Do I have him do because I was trying to think what hasn't he done on Earth, right? Mm-hmm. We just saw the Mission Impossible 7 where he goes off the cliff on a motorcycle and lets go of the motorcycle and is free falling. Free Falling could have also been another great song to sing to a girl, by the way. But I'm sitting there, so I'm thinking, is space the next thing? And then I remembered, one, he's shooting a film in space, it sounds like, coming up. And two, I was just like, that felt like the next logical step for Tom Cruise for a stunt, but it's not where I wanted it. And we talked about something earlier where I think Tom Cruise has a comedic side to him that doesn't get to be seen often. And I want to see Tom Cruise embrace that comedy side of him that we all know he has. And I wanted to see him do something outrageous, something shocking, something horrifying, something jaw-dropping. And I wanted to see Tom Cruise starring next to Dave England, Preston Lacey, Poopy, Wee Wee Man, Steve-O, and Johnny Knoxville in Jackass 5, The Last Ass.
The Last Ass. Oh, he'd be so good in Jackass. That's a brilliant call.
I just think it would be perfect. There's no one else to me that could really embrace the just wildness of what Jackass is supposed to be. He's never quite done stunts like this, probably out for his own volition. I actually made this image. I think that just perfectly encaptures everything that I'd want to see from Tom Cruise. He could work with poop humor. He could work with animals, which is something we haven't gotten to see in his stunts. He could do the crazy, outrageous stuff. He could do things like licking a taser. He could get hit by a bull. There's the just disgusting, outrageous stuff they do. He gets to work with comedic masterminds like Johnny Knoxville, who I will contend is, for all sensibilities, one of the best comedic presences we've had since Chaplin. And I just want to see Tom Cruise embrace something that we've never seen from him in stunts, which is, this is the complete tonal opposite of his stunts. All of his stunts always have a reason for action. What if he does stunts that have a reason that is within comedy? So yes, that is what I want to see from Tom Cruise.
Awesome.
Tom Cruise in Jackass 5, and I'm calling it The Last Ass.
I think there is a parallel to be drawn between Tom Cruise and Johnny Knoxville.
I think there is too.
They're both just pure craftsmen,
They take everything they do so seriously, and if you take Johnny Knoxville for what he is, where he is essentially a clown / jester
100%.
trying to entertain. And that's where you understand, like, that's where the intelligence of the comedy is at. I think it works. And I think Tom Cruise kind of has that same thing with the way he does action stunts.
Yeah. Tom Cruise is a clown for action. Like, he's so physical. He's so aware of how he looks on camera.
Yeah. And
in a way that works with comedy. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, he's in the next Jackass movie. He's above the age of 60. The Knoxville and all of them are 50. So maybe at 65 / 70, we can see Tom Cruise in Jackass 5.
Awesome.
That's my pitch.
I think for mine, I was thinking, like, as I've mentioned, a thing that frustrated me about Top Gun was that you don't get to see his face when he's in the plane for the most part. But I really like seeing him in really kind of life or death situations. Like, I really, he has that desperation. Like, you always believe that he believes that what he's doing is the most important thing in the world. And he's really remarkable that way. And so I was thinking I wanted to see him do something underwater, like have a certain amount of, like, have to maybe like release himself from, bonds or have to release someone or complete some task underwater with one holding of a breath. I think that would come across super well. And I think, like, he would just be able to convey that in an extremely compelling way that, like, you need to when the risk is super great. And then I realized that actually what I wanted to do, I wanted to see him drown. I think that would be awesome. Like, I want to see that. He would kill that.
You want to kill Tom Cruise?
I don't want to kill him.
Like, you just want to get someone save him.
like there's I don't have any ill will towards the man, but watching him drown would be like the best television.
He does a stunt in Mission Impossible 5, which is that Rogue Nation? I think it's called Rogue Nation, where he jumps into a huge, like, water tank and does a stunt underwater. And this is the same movie. That stunt kind of gets overshadowed because that's the same movie where he hangs off the side of an airplane.
Yes. Oh my God. I think I saw that on a plane. I don't remember it.
And, like, so he does that water sequence. What's crazy is, of course, because it's Tom Cruise, he trains with an Olympic diver to hold his breath. But you're right. There hasn't been quite that's in a water tank that feels a lot more controlled. I think it's something like an ocean. Like, why not have him doing this while sharks are swimming around too?
Yeah.
Like, just
sharks in.
Sharks, a whale, just for good measure. Like,
just for
everything.
Scale, yeah.
Yeah, just put it all out there. Put him in water and apparently have him drown.
Yeah.
I love it.
Like an F-14 just kind of in there, like in the water with him. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, I love it. Maybe have, like, you could have a submarine trying to attack him and he's out swimming it. I think there's a lot of potential for underwater.
As long as we get to see the life leave his eyes.
Spencer, where can the people find you?
I am.
Where can Tom Cruise's agent specifically?
Oh God, yeah. I'm on Twitter if you want more, like, me talking about killing Tom Cruise. I'm at Roomie Crisis. You can look up my name. I'm on there. I also, keep an eye out for, like, future, things I write and stuff like that. You can listen to Blackout Dates. That's fun. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, I have a short film coming out, which will be, I'll post that at some point. That'll be pretty fun. So yeah, keep an eye out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've truly enjoyed this hour and a half, what I think has been a really fun podcast. And so thank you for joining me, Spencer. Really appreciate it. You all know my name's Ben Friedman here from Ben and Bran See a Movie. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ben.